I really, really, really enjoy. I got to be honest with you. I grew up on football. I grew up on basketball, and once '85 came, Billy, I just stopped watching. I just drugs and being a criminal and trying to get your life together and getting locked up. And somewhere along the line, I missed everything, And there were flashes. I remember Michael Irvin at Miami. I remember a couple games, but I didn't get to know the players and the names and all that stuff and stats. And the national championship to me, whatever. I don't fucking know. It's January 8th. Some years it's January 3rd. I can't make up your fucking mind, I watched the first one you did, the U, and I was blown away with Luke and everything. This one blew me away a little more because I didn't know they had gone down that far. I didn't know that what point. I mean, it's amazing how they turned the program back around by 2001. That little black dude, Santana Moss, he's got a fan. How emotional he got, and the Blades kid.
Yeah, Al Blades. Look to the guy next to you and say he's the baddest motherfucker in here. Like I thought of you as soon as he was saying that. He was going crazy.
He was going crazy. Now, what were the Blades brothers? Which one shot himself or got shot at a party?
Well, there was three Blades brothers. Al died in a car accident. There was like a string of car accidents. It was terrible. That took really popular, big time Miami football players, including former football players, including Jerome Brown, who was like the Al Blades of the 80s. He died in a car accident. But the two brothers, Benny and Brian, we'll call them the original, the original Blades brothers, because they both played. They played in the 1980s, and they're still around, thankfully. They both went on to play professionally. You had Sean Taylor, of course, who would tragically, while he was playing for the Redskins, would be shot and killed in his home. You had Marlon Barnes, which is a really sad story from '96. It was the spring before I started at the University of Miami in the fall. He was beaten to death in his on-campus apartment at the University of Miami. It was his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend who targeted them and beat them both to death in the on-campus apartment. He was found by his roommates, in all football players, of course, in the apartment. And actually, Ray Lewis was one of Marlon Barnes' roommates, or apartment mates.
So Ray Lewis played in Miami too?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Warren Sapp.
Yeah.
These are the guys that played in Ray Lewis and Warren Sapp played in that kind of grim era, of like the early into the mid '90s. So they kind of fall in a moment in history that almost is like between the two documentaries. Like the first doc kind of ends in about '92, and then we're kind of in '95, '96, a little bit when the second documentary starts. So so they were in that, but they started the trend. I mean, the University of Miami had, for 17 years, 18 years on end, had at least one first-round draft pick every single year consecutively. It's the greatest run to this day in the history of the NFL draft. I think I'm pretty sure it was 17. 17 first-round draft picks just out of that one class. That 2001 class is what is Levitard calls it a nuclear absurdity, because the talent on that one roster is just psychotic, because you have 38 guys from one college football team that went pro, which is insane. 17 of them first-round draft picks. Well, one of the great stats that we didn't put in the movie, the Hurricane, there was 149 consecutive regular season weeks in the NFL where a former Miami Hurricane scored a touchdown in an NFL game. So for years and years and years on end, there was never a week of NFL football regular season where you didn't have a Miami Hurricane scoring a touchdown, which is like insane. But that was the level of talent that started coming out of that school in the 80s, but it was really the 90s where it hit that stride. And you mentioned Santana Moss. I mean, I'm a little guy. Santana isn't much bigger than I am, and he just started, I think, his 14th season in the NFL. The average career in the NFL is 3.3 years. So, like, you had these guys, they were just a special kind of in shape, a special kind of conditioned. They were trained, on another level. And you had, first-round draft picks backing each other up, future Pro Bowlers who were sitting on the bench in the late 90s, early 2000s, because the depth of talent and the competition on the team was just absolutely out of control.
Well, I went to Fort Lauderdale last June, and when I walked outside of the airport, I was already sweating. I couldn't imagine doing football practices in that heat in the summer.
It's a great point. I think that's part of the conditioning. I mean, you practice, at high noon in Miami, and you're just going to eventually be a better physical specimen, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, these guys weren't training. If you didn't drop out, obviously along the way, which a lot of people did, you were just going to turn into a better, more resilient and powerful football player, and that's exactly what these guys did. I think someone did the math, and they figured, with the contracts of a lot of these guys, that the 2001 Miami Hurricanes, I think, were about, they would have cost about $198 million in the NFL, or did eventually cost $198 million in the NFL, with all the starters and draft picks that went on to play. So you had, people say to this day that team, the 2001 Miami Hurricanes, in 2001 would have gone to the playoffs in the NFL with that level of even college talent. It's remarkable.
One thing I noticed about that documentary, I went to the University of Colorado. I had a friend that went down to ASU, and I used to go to that campus a lot. When I was a kid, I'd go to Rutgers to play basketball, and I saw the teams there that were assembled. When I was young, I got to go to five-star basketball camp in the 8th grade. I got a scholarship, and I got to see Dominic Wilkins and all these kids. And one thing I learned last night after watching that documentary and watching the first one, it takes a certain player to go to Miami. You have to know it your sophomore year in high school. First off, they're walking a thin line. They all walked the thin line. You and I both know it, that they were all on that thuggery line. Okay, they all had a little larceny in their blood, and they all could beat the fuck out of you. They could have taken their lives two ways. And I see all these big black guys smiling and laughing in the interviews, and I loved it. But then every once in a while, you throw a white dude in there. And that white dude was crazier than the black dudes.